What's going on, guys? Just like that, we are back with another video from The Video Game Guy. 2024 Silent Hill 2 Remake had fans of the original game excited about being able to go back and play what was allegedly one of the scariest games on the PlayStation 2. With over 2 million copies sold worldwide and $63 million in revenue already generated, it's clear that this game is pretty renowned to a lot of people. What I found to be the most shocking is that this game came out so long ago and that I never got the chance to play it. I have no idea how I ended up missing it the first time, but I assured myself that I wouldn't miss it this time. So yes, I subjected myself to this twisted and unsettling experience to bring you watching this right now some good content and entertainment. That alone should be worth a like and subscription, but if that isn't enough, stick around and watch me dive into the daunting game that is Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game that revolves around James Sutherland and his quest to find his wife Mary. After receiving a letter from his presumably deceased wife, James becomes convinced that he must find Mary and that she's alive and waiting for him in what used to be considered their special place in Silent Hill. What you'll quickly come to realize is that Silent Hill is riddled with mystery, death, and gloom. As you embark on this journey, the lines of reality and truth become blurred, and the unsettling undertone heighten your perception of what it is to be a frightening game. James initially comes across as a man who's just confused, who's just looking for some clarification. But as you press on, you actually start to question his sanity as he seemingly starts to succumb to the darkness and evil that roams Silent Hill. In the beginning, despite all the initial warnings and red flags telling him to turn back, James persists on trying to find his wife regardless of what he might need to endure. And as the mania and paranoia start to set in, you realize that Silent Hill is no longer that special place that it used to be. Throughout the story, you'll meet and interact with several different characters that all seem to have a connection to Silent Hill. They all come across a bit unhinged early on in the game and become progressively more insane as you continue your playthrough, as if something about Silent Hill has taken its toll on them. But despite seeing all this, none are successful in deterring our guy in pressing forward, and because of that, you'll find yourself knee-deep in the pits of Silent Hill and all that it has to offer. Now, that's not to say, however, that the game starts off that way. In fact, one of the things that I noticed right away is that this game has a bit more of a slow start to it. It's almost as if it's trying to ease you into the horror, and for some that might be a good thing, but for others it might not be. To be frank, the beginning of the game is somewhat boring and not really all that scary. Normally, games like this set the tone right away to keep players engaged, but this one really didn't. Now, I understand that this may have been intentional, but a slow start like this can make players not want to continue the game. Especially because this game isn't particularly clear with direction and instruction. In fact, the majority of the game is spent figuring out where to go and how to get there. You spend a lot of time backtracking, reading notes, and looking for clues spread throughout each section of the game. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but at times it can get frustrating as you'll find yourself wandering aimlessly to get to the next segment of the game. After enduring the slow start, however, you will start to notice the game ramping up, not only with the horror, but with the action as well. Monster encounters become a bit more frequent, and the actual setting of the game becomes scary and scarier. Each segment of the game has its own ambiance and brings with it its own set of challenges. Whether you find yourself exploring the corridors of the menacing Brookhaven Hospital or the bottomless caverns of the Toluca Prison, be ready to embrace a darker shift in the game. Now, one of the biggest reasons why this game was so successful in making me personally feel nervous and unsettled was due to the visuals. I really think they hit it out of the park in this area. Graphically speaking, you can argue that there are plenty of games that do look better, but the way this game was able to execute the focus of their genre the way that they did was truly impressive. This is exactly how I would expect a survival horror game to look. The dark lighting in certain areas made you question whether or not you wanted to continue, and I personally found myself reacting to every sound and movement that the game presented. The sounds of the rusted pipes and the distant curdling made me constantly feel like anything can happen at any moment, and that's a good feeling to have when playing a survival horror game. But I will say at times, it did feel like you would go long intervals without anything really happening, even though you were expecting something to. A couple more added surprise encounters, and the overall experience would have been elevated quite a bit. Still, at its peak, the setting and visuals were really impressive, and the in-game sounds made you feel both uneasy and isolated from the outside world. I really enjoyed seeing the different locations that they made you play through and all that they had to bring. Moving on from the visuals, I want to talk to you guys about one of the biggest gripes that I had with the game, and that was actually the story itself. Now, before I elaborate, just know that I understand that usually in games like these, the main character is supposed to come across as dense and unwavering, but it's not just that. It was the acting and lack of emotion for me that really made the story feel somewhat lackluster. Don't get me wrong, there was a major twist at the end of the story that I didn't see coming, but everything in between felt unfocused and lacked direction. The one constant was that he was trying to find his wife, but other than that, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. A lot of the subplots just didn't make sense to me. The game also kept introducing different characters that I think you were supposed to care about, but without any real character development, how were you supposed to? There was never any real connection formed between any of the characters, but somehow James not only cares for them, but is willing to endanger his own life for theirs. It didn't make any sense, and nothing ever really correlated with the main story plot. The additional side characters the game kept introducing me to had nothing to do with the main goal, which was to find my wife. Now, granted, I think they were there mostly to emphasize how Silent Hill draws people who have had traumatic experiences there back to it, but I have no idea how that had anything to do with James or how it connects. I would have preferred to see the game take a different approach by concentrating more on James Sutherland and developing his character instead of introducing me to several other characters that, quite frankly, I didn't care much about. I just didn't feel like any of the side characters really propelled the story any further. Also, the relationship between James and his wife could have been a little bit more of a focal point and could have been expounded upon further. I think going into more details about their relationship would have made me feel that much more compelled and motivated to find it. Another highlight of the game is the gameplay. Gameplay-wise, the game felt exactly how it was supposed to. The gunshots were loud, ammo at higher difficulties felt limited, and the movements felt restricted. Everything felt slow and methodical, and for me, it didn't take anything away from my experience. In fact, if anything, it added to the overall immersion of the game. There were times where real panic set in as I kept yelling at my screen for James to either move faster or to reload quicker so that I can escape whatever danger it was that I was facing. Meleeing felt pretty good as you thumped your way through the game, and killing the different monsters was also pretty fun. I personally would have preferred a bit more gore though while facing some of these enemies. Seeing their heads caved in instead of just stomping a lifeless corpse would have been much more satisfying, especially with the ones that snuck up on you and hid around corners. The character models could have also been a little bit scary to look at. Instead, most come across as disgusting blobs. The game does do a great job, however, of setting the tone during the middle and latter parts of the game. But when you finally face what it is that you've been hyping up in your mind the whole time, you realize that it's pretty much the same recycled monsters over and over with little to no variation. There are some sequences that will surprise you, but overall, after facing the same monsters over and over again, that initial shock will wither away. In fact, you might actually get to a point where you don't even find the enemies scary anymore. Instead, you'll be turning your attention to the setting and the atmosphere in which you'll be facing them. Puzzles were also a common theme in the game, and while I enjoyed some of them, others just kind of ruined the pacing for me as it took more time to figure out. This game, like I said earlier, wasn't always clear with instruction and direction, so you really had to take your time and needed to really pay attention to try to solve all the puzzles, especially because the higher the difficulty, the harder the puzzles were to solve. The puzzles weren't really what bothered me so much though. What became a bit more of a chore was all the back and forth it took to get to the point where you can do the puzzle. Throughout each segment, there would be countless items that you would need to retrieve, combine, and use to potentially get to the next section of the game. Sometimes, after spending so much time finding these items, the game would then make you have to solve a puzzle that'll get you to the next part in the game. Throughout my playthrough, at times I just wanted to rush through some of these parts to get on with the game, but all in all, at least they did make an effort to vary things up and to make the game a bit more challenging. I just wish they would have given the player a bit more direction so that these parts of the game didn't feel like such a chore. Guys, at the end of the day, if you ask me if this game is scary, I will say yes, but not initially. I would also imply that it lacks focus on the narrative and in the character development. The acting was bad, and the monotone responses to everything really made James Sutherland a forgettable character. There was no correlation between the main plot and some of the subplots the game kept throwing at you, and the monsters you faced felt recycled with little to no variation. It did, however, give you great visuals, great sounds, solid gameplay, and a great setting to play through. It also gave you an ending that I think might surprise a few people. At the end of it all, does the game have its flaws? Yes, but it did deliver on the core elements of what make a good survival horror game. It did just enough to make me want to get through it to find out how it was going to end. For those reasons, Silent Hill 2 gets a 7 out of 10. Although I would have liked to see different creative choices and better execution in some areas, all in all, it's a good game that I would recommend if you are into the survival horror genre.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat, where you answer our questions correctly and win a prize beyond your wildest dreams.
Thank you guys so much for sticking with me till the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the review and are enjoying the channel overall. Let's continue to make it grow. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, be on the lookout for the next video from your boy, the Video Game Guy. Thanks, guys.